Hey there, HorseCenter fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show. Matt, we're talking about a big weekend at Churchill Downs, plus plenty to talk about with this Triple Crown of 2020.
There was plenty to talk about already this week, and we haven't even run any of the big races.
That's right, and plenty of other good stakes at Churchill Downs on Saturday. Watch it all now with Matt and I right here on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the great pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I am really good, Brian. There is so much to talk about what's been talked about all week long, the new Triple Crown.
That's right, Matt. We might as well start with the Triple Crown dates that were announced. 2/3 of the Triple Crown dates were announced. We're also going to talk about a huge weekend, huge Saturday, 5 consecutive stakes in my neck of the woods, Matt, here at Churchill Downs. But let's talk Triple Crown first. And, you know, the Preakness date was announced. We had talked about it before, so it was no big surprise that they're taking smack dab in the middle of the Kentucky Derby and the Breeders' Cup this year, which would be Saturday, October 3rd at Pimlico. Same distance, mile 3/16, no surprise. But what it really did, Matt, I think, is it forced the hand of NYRA, because you got 4 weeks from the Derby to the Preakness, 4 weeks from the Preakness to the Breeders' Cup. What does that leave for Belmont, Matt? Well, what did it leave for Belmont?
Well, it left a date in June, Brian, and hey, let's set this straight. That the old Triple Crown House of Cards came tumbling down when Churchill Downs decided that they would move the Kentucky Derby to September 5th. That's the bottom line. Everything that happened, particularly in the last couple of weeks with the announcement of the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes, happened in response to that. And the Preakness from selection, from what I understand, had a lot to do with finding a date on NBC, on national TV, that was available in the midst of football season, if football season goes the way it used to be with college football and pro football, a month out from the Kentucky Derby. So that was a big change. No place to go after that for the Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, well, Matt, in this year of the pandemic, everything is upside down this year. Whether you're talking about daily life, work, sports, or horse racing. Horse racing's no different. So we have to kind of go with what we get a little bit. But on the other hand, we could criticize some things here, and I won't hesitate in doing that. I think that the Triple Crown series was undermined a little bit when Churchill Downs quickly decided to move their Derby to September 5. Was it the best decision for the Derby? I don't know. I guess they thought it was at the time. It might be, but they really didn't consider the Triple Crown. They didn't really consider the other entities of the Triple Crown, Maryland, Pimlico, owned by the Shawnee Group, or of course NYRA and the Belmont Stakes, or their big Midsummer Derby, the Travers for that matter. So it really did start a domino effect, as you kind of alluded to there. And I don't blame what the Shawnee Group did. They found a date, maybe a little clearer on the NBC sports calendar, as you said, but also it really falls into a good spot between the Derby and the Preakness. Horses can legitimately run now in the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Breeders' Cup Classic, or the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile for that matter. Whereas if the Belmont tried to squeeze in the fall, you're looking at a Belmont that would have been greatly hurt, I think, by the timing of everything. So the Belmont did what they thought was best, and that is June 20, 2 weeks after the original date, well clear of the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. But I think the bigger news is the distance. The Belmont, the tested champions, 1.5 miles, all these years, will now be run at 1.8 miles, 9 furlongs, out of the chute, out of the small chute at Belmont Park nowadays, and it's one turn.
It is, Brian. That's just because of the configuration, the 1.5-mile configuration of the Belmont Park track, and really the 10 furlong distance is not a really good option at Belmont Park because you have to start in the middle of the first turn. But there were a lot of other factors involved in the decision. In the decision by NYRA, obviously the decisions by Churchill Downs and Pimlico with the first two legs, but frankly, NYRA did not want to run in the fall and face competition on a weekend from football. They thought that running in June was a date where they're going to maximize their handle, which they need to do badly now with the fact that the casino at Aqueduct has not been open, so the money flow to the purse account is way down and has affected the purse account. There were so many things going on here, and talking more about the distance, I think if the Belmont was run at 1.5 miles under the current configuration, with the Kentucky Derby 3 months down the road, I don't know how many horses, Brian, they would have gotten into a field at 1.5 miles. I think even though Baffert said at some point he wouldn't have run in it, he would have run in it because the lure of another Triple Crown on his resume depends on him running in the Belmont Stakes, whatever distance it is. But I think they're going to get a big field at 9 furlongs.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. Forget about the tradition of the Triple Crown, if you will, because this year is just like it's not like any other year, and we all know that. The Belmont Stakes, it's going to be weird to see it one turn, a 9 furlong race, but that is where it is now on the schedule, June 20, where these horses have not run as much as they would have run, and with so many big races, now it leads into the Travers. We don't know for sure when the Travers will be, but it should lead into the Travers of some sort. And then the Derby and Preakness are later in the fall. I think horsemen would have really had a problem with 1.5 miles at this point in this particular season. And it makes sense. 9 furlongs is going to be a popular race now. Call it a Wood Memorial at Belmont Park, if you will. But I think you're going to have a really good field. You're going to have a lot of good horses. And maybe we should just be thankful of that rather than worry too much about the lack of tradition of this year's Triple Crown or the fact that the Belmont really isn't the Belmont that we know. All right, we're going to talk more about the Belmont soon, Matt, but let's get into this weekend. The Matt Winn Stakes at Churchill Downs on Saturday, I think, is the race of the weekend, frankly. Santa Anita has some really nice turf racing through the holiday weekend, but I'm really interested in the Matt Winn. Most of all, it drew a really nice field of 12. It's a Kentucky Derby prep. It has Kentucky Derby points, but it's also now a prep for the Belmont, right? 4 weeks in front of the Belmont, 1 mile and 16th to the 1 mile and 8th Belmont. Horses that do well here could certainly come back to run at Belmont in the first leg of this year's Triple Crown. And it also features the much awaited return of Maxfield, Matt, who was so good in that Keeneland Breeders' Futurity, that Grade 1 Keeneland Breeders' Futurity way back last October.
Yes, Brian, and hey, you and I have already talked about Maxfield on a number of shows earlier this year. Folks know his resume as a 2-year-old, probably going to be a big favorite, a strong favorite in this race, which drew a field of 12, and the other ones in there have a little bit more recency in their form. Nothing stellar in their form compared to what Maxfield showed as a 2-year-old. But hey, it's tough to come back and make your first start after all that time, after an ankle problem, against an experienced field of runners.
Yeah, certainly the 11 other horses he'll be running against on Saturday have more recent experience. They are coming up to this graded stakes race, how you usually come up to a graded stakes race. Maxfield is the exception. Maxfield has been off for about 7.5 months. He had minor surgery to remove bone chips. but we know how good this Son of Street Sense was last year. Let me say this, Brendan Walsh might be a trainer that's not known nationally too well, but a really good horseman here in Kentucky, and it's nice to see him have a really good horse. And I think Maxfield is a really good horse, as we can tell from his 2 races last year. He won at Churchill Downs first out, made a nice rally to get up in a maiden race before what he did at Keeneland. Yeah, the odds in the Matt Winn make it a little bit tough. If you're just looking at this race from a handicapping betting perspective, a little tough to get excited about Maxfield as somewhere between even money to 2-1 in a big, deep field. It'll be interesting. He's been working well. He's won at Churchill already. Be interesting to see what he can do because, Matt, I think it's no stretch to say that he can quickly move into one of the top spots of this crop if we see the old Maxfield flashes stuff on Saturday. A lot of good horses, though. Maybe no superstars below him, but there's a lot of good horses. And interestingly, there's 3 horses, 2 horses besides Maxfield, who have only run twice. First one I want to talk about is Pneumatic out of the Steve Asmussen barn. Son of Uncle Mo looked really good in 2 races so far at Oaklawn Park.
I agree with that. Certainly an intriguing alternative to Maxfield in here. As you said, 2 for 2 at Oaklawn Park, and we know the quality of the racing at Oaklawn Park was really good. The allowance race was a mile, so Pneumatic has gone 2 turns now. Son of Uncle Mo, a little bit of a number of horses in this field that seem to prefer to come off of the pace a bit, but I like Pneumatic in here a lot. I think he's probably going to get bet off of the Asmussen, off of the 2 for 2, but as an alternative to Maxfield's got to be one that you consider. His speed figures are just as good as any other horse in the field.
Yeah, Pneumatic has a lot to like. I actually think Pneumatic may have more speed than some of the others. It seems like there's a lot of horses who really like to rally, including the favorite Maxfield in here. So I think Pneumatic might be able to get a more forward position, maybe even than he had last time. He's won at 6 furlongs, he's won at a mile, and he's looked good doing it. I think Pneumatic will get that. I think he will be the second choice in here, despite the fact that you have a couple of horses who ran really well in stakes races down in New Orleans at fairgrounds. New York Traffic, NY Traffic as I call them, and Major Fed knocked heads a couple times in back-to-back races, the Risen Star and Louisiana Derby. They didn't win either one, but they both ran well in both. They're both in here. Different horses, though. Major Fed really likes to come from well out of it, while NY Traffic might be the speed of the speed in here.
Yeah, you have to consider NY Traffic a little bit more than you might considering the pace scenario. I think NY Traffic is going to be the major speed in here, trained by Safi Joseph, who we know can put speed into a horse. He was second in the Louisiana Derby behind Wells Bayou when Wells Bayou got away pretty cleanly, and third in the Risen Star. I know, Brian, you don't really like that fairgrounds form from some of these prep races, but I think New York Traffic has a really good chance of being out on the lead and maybe can get a little bit loose. So he's one that I'm going to consider also as a possibility to beat Maxfield.
Yeah, I like NY Traffic quite a bit in this spot. I think there's only out of the 12 horses, there's really only one other horse who's shown some speed in here, and he's a much cheaper animal. Yeah. So I think NY Traffic really has a good race setup here at a mile 16th at Churchill Downs. I think NY Traffic probably the third choice in here, possibly even the fourth choice in here. Really has a nice race setup and a good shot to run big. Major Fed, on the other hand, both of those races, I think Major Fed is a horse to watch out for as we go longer, as the season moves on. The Son of Ghost Zapper has been good, and he's been getting better for trainer Greg Foley. Neither his trip in the Risen Star, where he got up for second, just getting by NY Traffic, or the Louisiana Derby was fourth, where he was fourth were very good. In the Louisiana Derby, he just broke slow, was way back, was last most of the race, was wide all the way around, and he was rallying, just missed third in there. I think he's a good horse. I think a mile 16th, though, without a ton of speed, might be tough for Major Fed in this spot. Another horse I want to talk about, getting back to the horses who have only run 2 times, we talked about Maxfield and Pneumatic already. The horses are going to get bet. I am very high on Mystic Guide, Matt. He's like Maxfield. He's another Godolphin homebred. This one is out of the barn of Mike Stidham. And I saw his maiden win, and I look back at his first race. First race was a sprint where he really came running, and then he just dominated from off the pace at a mile 16th fairgrounds. Those were maidens. But I think this horse, really, really well-bred son of Ghost Zapper, is for real.
Yeah, he certainly could be. And Michael Stidham is the kind of trainer that is good at bringing along horses like this. I kind of feel a little bit about him and Major Fed, their post positions, Mystic Guide in the 1 hole, Major Fed all the way out in the 12 hole. It seems like it's going to put them pretty far back in the beginning of the race. So they're probably going to come running. They're going to need a trip. It'll be interesting to see what they can do.
Yeah, you're right about the post. I'm not crazy about the 1 hole for Mystic Guide. What I am kind of crazy about is him as the 5th or 6th choice in here. I think he'll be double digits, and I think he is a graded stakes horse. Even though he's only run in 2 maiden races yet, I think he is going to be that good. So I'm really looking forward to spreading Mystic Guide around here with some others as a good long shot possibility. You got attachment rate. We shouldn't skip over Dale Romans, kind of the house horse here. Dale Romans, of course, is Mr. Churchill Downs attachment rate, coming off a couple of stakes tries. Looks like he's getting better. He was 3rd in the Gotham, just missed 2nd in the Gotham. And then last time he was 2nd to a horse I really like as well, Dr. Post. That came in the Unbridled at Gulfstream Park. Attachment rate, Mystic Guide, I have him at 12-1 on my morning line. Interesting horses.
Yeah, absolutely. Attachment rate shows up when he goes into the gate. So an interesting field for me. My top pick is going to be Pneumatic. I think jockey Ricardo Santana, who is a very aggressive rider, like you alluded to, Brian, is going to get him out of the gate and get him close to the pace in the beginning of the race. Yeah,
Pneumatic has a big shot in here. I, too, would like to take a little shot against Maxfield. I think Maxfield is going to be the real deal. But at the odds and the situation, I want to take a shot against him. I'll be using Mystic Guide and NY Traffic the most, but kind of spread them around a little bit. 1 bomb in here, maybe not a bomb, but certainly a long shot, certainly not one of the 6 favorites. Shake some action out of the Brad Cox barn. He won a couple straight at Fairgrounds, son of Into Mischief. Really didn't get a good trip in the Louisiana Derby when he was 6th. He gets Javi Castellano back on him for this race. I think he's better than that 6th in the Louisiana Derby showed. He might be a horse that can pop up into the exotics at some good odds. All right, Matt. That's our Matt Winn. Unless you had anything else for us.
No, I'm ready to go on to the blame.
Yeah, well, five stakes in a row. So this will be an all stakes pick 5, late pick 5 at Churchill Downs on Saturday. Another one we certainly wanted to mention was the blame, which is for older horses, kind of the prep for the Stephen Foster this year, named after the Breeders' Cup Classic winner. Drew a field of 14, Matt, and I think it's wide open. Maybe we can start with Global Campaign, who was a good-looking, progressive 3-year-old last year before he got hurt, returned with a pretty nice win at Gulfstream Park.
Yeah, it is a wide open race of 14 and a quality field, Brian. In my eyes, definitely a graded stakes quality field in here. But yeah, a global campaign for Sagamore Farms and veteran trainer Stanley Huff came back and ran a big one at Gulfstream Park in an allowance race. Got a really nice speed figure in there. We remember last year as a 3-year-old, he was the winner of the Peter Pan at Belmont Park and was a real prospect on the Triple Crown trail. But like you said, had some injuries, had some things going on. And I sure look forward to him having a campaign this year as a 4-year-old where we see him on the track a little bit more consistently.
Yeah, the Son of Curling could be a very good graded stakes horse this year. We don't know for yet, and that made the allowance race where he won in return. If you look at that, there were a lot of horses there bunched for second. He kind of kicked it in at the 8th pole, but it was a very nice return race and a horse with a lot of potential. Maybe he's a grade 3 type. Maybe he's more than that, but he's a horse I look forward to. Another horse I look forward to coming back is Owendale. Actually, I look forward to Owendale probably more than anybody coming back in this race. Another from the barn of Brad Cox, another son of Into Mischief, trained by Brad Cox. I thought he had a really good year at 3. Granted, he wasn't the best 3-year-old in the country. Definitely not the best 3-year-old in the country, but he just kept progressing. He won several races. He won 3 graded stakes last year all over the country. But I thought his best race of all came in his last race of the season, the last time we saw him, which was at Churchill Downs against older horses in the Clark Handicap, but he rallied for second.
Yeah, he certainly did. It was a big closing move in the Clark, a big rally to get up for second and just missed the win. It was an impressive way to end his campaign, as you said, taking on older horses in here. Maybe a horse that prefers to go a little bit longer than the 1-turn mile that the blame is. But it seems like this field of 14's got a lot of speed in there, a lot of horses that want to be on the lead or pressing the pace. And even though it's just a mile, Owendale's going to get a good setup.
Yeah, and he was able to win distances, I think a mile, 16th, mile, 8th, pretty regularly last year. So maybe a mile with, like you say, a good pace, a hardy pace, and a big field. And maybe it could set up for Owendale. Maybe a tough spot, first race back against a good field and a deep field and a 14-horse field. But I think Owendale's a horse who could really move right into top handicap horses this year in races like the Stephen Foster, the Clark, and even the Breeders' Cup Classic. Matt, we haven't mentioned Mr. Money yet. Mr. Money won 4 graded stakes in a row last year, including a couple at Churchill, and we know he likes the 1 mile.
Yeah, that's for sure. He had that fantastic run last year as a 3-year-old, putting together that winning streak, and then narrowly missed in the Pennsylvania Derby. Ended up his 3-year-old campaign trailing off a little bit in form. Came back this year, made his debut in the Oaklawn Mile. Ran 6th, little bit of a disappointing performance. Didn't get to see the Mr. Money that we expected to see. He's another one of that of the horses that likes to be on the lead or pressing the pace. Drew the 13 hole, which to me means that he's probably going to have to run out of the gate. And I don't know. I just don't love a horse that tends to get a little headstrong like Mr. Money has in the past in that scenario.
Yeah, he's a nice horse. I think he's a nice miler. I could see him running in races like the Met Mile and the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. He didn't run his best in the Dirt Mile last year out in California. I think he's better than that, and I also think he's better than his first race this year. Remember last year when he came north, his form was not quite the best, and then he came here and really took off at Churchill, took off in the Pathé Mile, 1 mile trip at Churchill. So I would expect big improvement off that wet track performance as well last time at Oaklawn. I think Mr. Money, despite the post, is one of the ones to beat in here, but there's several, Matt. Money, we got Silver Dust, you got Diamond King, you got Snapper Sinclair. Who else you want to talk about?
Yeah, hey, you got to mention Silver Dust for Brett Calhoun, 6-year-old now, but this is a horse that never runs a bad race, Brian. A stalker kind of presser in there, so it might sit off the lead a little bit. Has won Grade 3 races several times already, and just with that kind of resume is one that you have to consider. You mentioned Diamond King also for John Service, came back to win the Stymie at Aqueduct in his 2020 debut. So we could expect him to maybe improve a little bit off that. But again, he's out in the 14 hole. It is a one-turn mile, so being out that wide is not the same thing as being in a one-turn mile. Being in a two-turn mile, in that wide of a post. But he's going to have to run from way out there to stay in contention. But another quality speed horse that needs to be considered.
Yeah, we also haven't mentioned Backyard Haven yet, who was a very good horse at Churchill Downs a couple years ago. Didn't race much with physical issues, but he's coming back as well. I'm excited about Owendale this year. I'm also interested to see how good Global Campaign could be. But for my money, Matt, I think the horse to beat, if I had to pick one horse to beat in here, is Mr. Money, just because I think 1 mile at Churchill, I think this is the kind of race he's built for. So he'd be a very lukewarm top choice for me in the blend.
Yeah, and that sounds reasonable. I'm going to take a shot with I think it will be a little bit more of a price with Silver Dust.
Yeah, Silver Dust will be higher coming off that last race he ran. All right, Matt, some other good races at Churchill Downs on Saturday. Sharing, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Fillies winner, faces a strong cast of 3-year-old turf fillies in the Tepin. You got 3-year-old turf males. I don't think that's as good as race as the Tepin, but they're running on the turf in a stakes race as well. And then you got Dunbar Road, Matt, the Chad Brand trainee, daughter of Quality Road, who won both the Mother Goose and the Alabama last year. She makes her long-awaited return in the Shawnee on Saturday at Churchill.
Yeah, Shawnee drew a field of 8, so it looks like a good spot for Dunbar Road to come back in. We remember Dunbar Road won 4 of her first 5 races, and you mentioned those big wins in the Mother Goose and the Alabama, and she's been off since running 5th in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. So yeah, I mean that's where we are right now with all the big tracks opening up now. We're going to see a lot of these quality big name horses from last year starting to make their returns.
Yeah, horses like Dunbar Road, horses like Code of Honor, who we found out will be coming back soon at Belmont in the Westchester. Dunbar Road, I still think could be the best 3-year-old filly of last year, at least the one that does the most this year. Dunbar Road looked that good in early in her year. I don't think she ran her absolute best out at Santa Anita for the Breeders' Cup. I think she's got a lot of potential. I expect a big year for Dunbar Road. Again, the Mother Goose and Alabama winner. She's a Julie's in there too, Matt. She became a Grade 1 winner. She's won quite a few stakes races actually, but she became a Grade 1 winner for trainer Steve Asmussen last year about this time at Churchill Downs. And like Dunbar Road, she'll also be making her seasonal debut in the Shawnee.
Yeah, there's a couple of nice horses in that field.
Yeah, it's a great card. Like I said, that turf filly race that Sharon comes back in, really good gaggle of 3-year-old turf fillies. So enjoy Churchill Downs on Saturday. Churchill Downs is now back in full swing, and they proved it with 5 nice stakes races in a row on Saturday. Speaking of Churchill, Matt, did you notice a race early on the card last weekend? There was a filly winning an allowance race. We don't usually talk about early card allowance races, but there was I guess she's not a filly anymore. I guess she's a mare. Did you notice the name of that winner?
Yeah, so we were speaking about horses making debuts now that the major tracks are back. Of course, we're talking about Monomoy Girl, the 3-year-old filly champion from 2018, who won virtually every race that she was in, or finished first in every race that she was in, and then a series of problems over the next 18 months, but she came back and did everything that you needed to see from a horse, from a mare now, who had been away from the races that long. She raced between horses. She sat off the pace, which wasn't something that she did very often in the past. Rated kindly and in the stretch got clear and went by the rest of the field easily, and was taken in hand at the end of the race to still win by close to 3 lengths. So the kind of debut that you like to see. And once again, Brian, hey, it's another year where the older female dirt division seems to be pretty strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And Monomoy Girl is the best of the bunch, Matt. I know there's a ton of Midnight Pursuit fans out there, and I can't blame you for being a Midnight Pursuit fan. But let's face facts. Monomoy Girl raced against Midnight Pursuit 4 times at 3, and she beat her all 4 times. I know one she was taken down, but she beat her all 4 times. Monomoy Girl, I don't think gets the respect that she deserves. This is a filly who's run 12 times. She was second by a neck as a 2-year-old in a graded stakes. She was taken down in the cotillion. 1 horse in 12 races has finished ahead of her, and that came 2.5 years ago. I think she's a special kind of filly, and I was curious to see. I was dubious. What would we see after 18 months? I know she'd been working well, but yeah, you used some of the same words I used. She really rated kindly in there, which was nice to see, and she had an explosive move when asked. That wasn't a bad little allowance race either. There were some horses who had stakes experience in there, and she looked like Monomoy Girl hadn't lost a step. She looked bigger and stronger than she had a year and a half before. I am very excited to see what Monomoy Girl can do, because I think she is truly one of the best fillies we've seen in the last 10 years. And now that she's a 5-year-old mare and looking this good, wow. That's a top-notch racehorse we have back in training, so we got to be happy about that. And we're also happy about all the big races coming up. Finally, we have many tracks opening up, Matt, and many big races to look forward to. Whether you like the Belmont coming in 4 weeks or not, it's coming, and it's going to have a good field. Let me get a parting shot from you, sir.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember this is a year, 2020, unlike any other that any of us have ever experienced. So we've got a Triple Crown that's a little bit different this year, but hey, that's the way it is. Let's enjoy it. The Belmont at 1.125 miles, I think, is going to have a fantastic field. So there's a lot of good racing ahead. If any of us want to complain, let's complain about the fact that we can't be out there at the races enjoying the big stakes and the great horses that we all like to. So if we're upset about something, let's be upset about that. I wish I could be out at the track in the morning, in the afternoon, like we all love to, but we can't. So let's enjoy what we got at racing, and we can all bet at home as we have become accustomed to. And of course, I want to thank our producer Brett Workman for putting together the show.
Well said, sir. I think the Triple Crown is wonky this year. Let's face it; it's topsy turvy, and the whole year is topsy turvy. It is what it is. And if you want to denounce any horse that can sweep all 3 races, go ahead and denounce them. On the other hand, I don't think there's going to be a winner of all 3 races this year. I think it's crazy with the amount of time spread and all that to expect one horse to win them all. But hey, you never know. We'll see. We'll worry about that when we get there. Thanks to Brett, our great producer. And I'd just like to reiterate, racing, even on TV, is something that we love. So we're going to keep loving it. Thanks to all of you for watching HorseCenter every week. We sure do appreciate it. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here at Horse Racing Nation, please do so. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, the best contest site out there. That's Derby Wars. Matt and I will be back next week. I think we're going to be talking a whole lot more about the Belmont Stakes right here on HorseCenter. We'll see you then.